Hello and welcome to show number 5 of Home Winemaking 101. This show is going to be focusing on racking your wine and why we rack the wine and what the benefits are of racking. I'm going to also go through the process of cleaning and sanitizing the equipment, again because it's not a great deal of effort in this particular step. There isn't that much equipment involved. But I wanted to go through it again because it is the most important part of winemaking as far as I'm concerned, short of keeping wine out of the air and light. So let's talk about racking. First of all, racking is taking wine from the vessel, which is a carboy. In this particular case, this is a I think it's a 6.5 gallon carboy. And you're going to take it and siphon it from the carboy that it's in into a clean, sanitized carboy, leaving behind the sediments. And that's the idea of racking. Each time that you rack, the wine should become clearer, and you should be able to see a significant difference, especially in white wine, that each time the racking process takes place, you're going to see less and less particles in the wine itself if you hold it up to the light. And that's the whole idea behind the racking process. I just want to touch briefly on filtering because I no longer filter my wines. I used to at one point. You can buy a machine, or in some cases rent machines, to filter the wine. The claim of the filtering manufacturers are that it gives your wine a certain element of brilliance and polish to it. And it may be the case. I have not significantly noticed the difference between filtering and not filtering. And I did it for quite some time in the beginning. It is an added expense because you have to buy the filtering pads. The machine is fairly expensive in and of itself if you want to buy it. So I've chosen, at the suggestion of other people that have made wine for years, to avoid the filtering process. I also think the filtering process takes some of the flavor out of the wine. But again, that could be my imagination, I suppose. So anyway, let's get on with it. We need some equipment, and let's go through what that is. I have a bung, and you know what the bung does. It sits on top of the carboy. We also have the airlock, which sits on top of or into the bung. I'm going to clean and sanitize these by putting them in a container. We're also going to clean and sanitize the siphon itself. We will do that in a two-step process. The first step is I'm going to siphon what we have here for a cleaner. In this particular case, I have Easy Clean. And Easy Clean works, as I mentioned in a previous show, when it is exposed to oxygen. So once we get this into the carboy through the siphon, it will actually start working on cleaning the inside of the tube and the inside of the siphon. It then will also, as we splash it around inside the carboy and empty it out, it will also do the same thing for the carboy, and that is clean it. When I say clean it, what I really mean is any particles that may be left from the last time we used the equipment, or dust, or whatever it might be, should be taken care of and rinsed out by the Easy Clean. Then we'll go into the sanitizing process, and I'll show you how that's done and what we use for that. So let's just get on with this. I have already made a fresh gallon of Easy Clean, and we will siphon that into the carboy. Now, while that's siphoning into the carboy, let me just say a couple of things about racking. The number of times you rack should be kept to a minimum. That is, you shouldn't be racking your wine once you start making it after the secondary. You shouldn't be racking it every week. Pick more of a monthly cycle, or even more than that. If you have your wine stored in a cool place, such as in your cellar, if your cellar is between 60 and 70 degrees, let's say, the particles will tend to drop quicker the colder it is. So in the beginning, when you start making your wine, you want it warm to make the wine because the yeast needs the warmth to start generating and converting the sugar into alcohol. But once you get past that primary stage, and even, well, I should say the secondary stage, once you get past the secondary stage, which is sort of the end of the fermentation process, you really want to be looking at a cooler place to have your carboy. And that will help you eliminate the particles quicker. So I'll take the excess. Now the reason you want to be careful about the number of times you rack is, as I've mentioned before, one of wine's biggest enemies is air, oxygen. And you want to try to avoid as much as possible that contact with the oxygen. So the more times you rack, the more exposure you have. However, I've found that 3 rackings after your secondary is not at all unusual, and in order to clear some wines. And you have to be careful with the reds because the reds are not easy to see the particles in them unless you put a little bit in a glass and hold it up to the light. But if you have about 3 rackings, that's about right. And the exposure during the 3 rackings is not going to hurt the wine. So I'm going to rock this back and forth, and if you listen, you'll hear the pop coming out of there. That's because that Easy Clean is mixing with the air in this carboy, and it's starting to clean it. And the idea is to just get it really well coated, and then make sure you get the top as well. And it always helps to have a carboy stand so that it can drain. Don't try to balance it on the neck. That's nearly impossible. And then the rest of the equipment, I'll use the sponge to make sure that I cover all the areas. And you want to make sure that you drain the cleaner out of there as well. Obviously, it's going to take some time to dry. The manufacturer's recommended time is 10 minutes. I'd like to go a little bit longer than that to make sure that it is in fact dry before I do my sanitizing. Now you say, well, you just did the cleaning and you put it on dirty equipment. Well, I kind of did, but I don't worry about that because it still has that cleaner on it, and that cleaner is actually going on the dirty equipment. And the same holds true for the sanitizer. And again, I clean the airlock and the bung. And then we'll come back to you in about 10 minutes or so and start the process of racking. And we're going to go through the sanitizing phase for the equipment. This is potassium metabisulfite. It is a sanitizing solution, 3 tablespoons per gallon of water. You will notice when you mix this, it has a very, very strong pungent odor if you happen to inhale it. So you want to be careful not to do that. I don't think it will hurt you, but on the other hand, it's also not very pleasant. But it does sanitize. So we're going to use this to do the sanitization of the equipment. And we're basically going to do it the same way we did the last step, the cleaning step. I can already smell that when I took that cover off. Okay, I'm going to put the carboy down here. go and get my siphon. I don't worry about the floor, the cement. They're going to be mopped afterwards anyway. Just want to drain out all the cleaning solution. And then we will siphon into the carboy. And again, while we're doing this, it's sanitizing the inside of the tube, the inside of the siphon. So all the equipment inside and out will be sanitized. The other equipment that I cleaned, that is the airlock and the bung, we will put in the tub so that we can sanitize those as well. And again, once we go through this process, we also have to wait another 10 minutes or so for it to actually sanitize the equipment. But these are times when you can take a break, have a cup of coffee or whatever you want to do in the meantime. And these steps also don't take very long. This racking process is the least time consuming of all of the winemaking steps, but they're probably as important as the rest of the steps. Okay. Again, I'm going to go through the very same process with the carboy, rolling it back and forth to make sure that I cover all of the surface on the inside with the sanitizing solution. The one thing that I didn't say at the outset of this, obviously when you begin the process of cleaning and sanitizing, you want to make sure that your hands are clean. It would not be wise to be doing this with dirty hands to begin with, because everything you sanitize and clean, you're going to be dirtying with your hands. All you need to do is move the instruments around in the sanitizing solution. You don't have to scrub them or anything of that nature. The solution does the work. Well, let's try this again. There we go. Get this into a coil so we can fit it into that tub and get every part of it so that it's sanitized, because you're frankly not sure how far down in the wine it's going to actually go, and you want to make sure that all of it is sanitized. Dump out the excess and drain it. Now keep in mind that the solution that I'm using here to sanitize is also something that you actually put in the wine to kill any bacteria in the wine itself. So even if you didn't have it completely drained, it's not going to hurt your wine. There's not enough on the instruments to make a big difference one way or the other. But I like to have it drained because I like to control how much metabisulfite I'm actually putting into my wine as opposed to putting it in by accident. So let's wait about 10 minutes. We'll come back again, finish up the show. And we're going to go through the sanitizing phase. For the equipment. This is potassium metabisulfite. It is a sanitizing solution, 3 tablespoons per gallon of water. You will notice when you mix this, it has a very, very strong pungent odor if you happen to inhale it. So you want to be careful not to do that. I don't think it will hurt you, but on the other hand, it's also not very pleasant. But it does sanitize. So we're going to use this to do the sanitization of the equipment. And we're basically going to do it the same way we did the last step, the cleaning step. I can already smell that when I took that cover off. Okay, I'm going to put the cowboy down here. Go and get my siphon. I don't worry about the floor, the cement. They're going to be mopped afterwards anyway. Just want to drain out all the cleaning solution. And then we will siphon into the cowboy. And again, while we're doing this, it's sanitizing the inside of the tube, the inside of the siphon. So all the equipment inside and out will be sanitized. The other equipment that I cleaned, that is the airlock and the bung, we will put in the tub so that we can sanitize those as well. And again, once we go through this process, we also have to wait another 10 minutes or so for it to actually sanitize the equipment. But these are times when you can take a break, have a cup of coffee or whatever you want to do in the meantime. And these steps also don't take very long. This racking process is the least time consuming of all of the winemaking steps, but they're probably as important as the rest of the steps. Okay. So again, I'm going to go through the very same process with the cowboy, rolling it back and forth and make sure that I cover all of the surface on the inside with the sanitizing solution. One thing that I didn't say at the outset of this, obviously when you begin the process of cleaning and sanitizing, you want to make sure that your hands are clean. It would not be wise to be doing this with dirty hands to begin with, because everything you sanitize and clean, you're going to be dirtying with your hands. All you need to do is move the instruments around in the sanitizing solution. You don't have to scrub them or anything of that nature. The solution does the work. Well, let's try this again. There we go. Get this into a coil so we can fit it into that tub and get every part of it so that it's sanitized, because you're frankly not sure how far down in the wine it's going to actually go, and you want to make sure that all of it is sanitized. Dump out the excess and drain it. Now keep in mind that the solution that I'm using here to sanitize is also something that you actually put in the wine to kill any bacteria in the wine itself. So even if you didn't have it completely drained, it's not going to hurt your wine. There's not enough on the instruments to make a big difference one way or the other. But I like to have it drained because I like to control how much metabisulfite I'm actually putting into my wine as opposed to putting it in by accident. So let's wait about 10 minutes. We'll come back again, finish up the show. Okay, the cowboy now has had a chance after about 12 minutes or so to be sanitized, and we're ready to go on with the racking operation itself. take the carboy off and put it down lower. Obviously, if you're siphoning something, you need the vessel that's going to receive the wine at a lower distance from the one that it's coming from. Now, this happens to be a Sauvignon Blanc that I made starting in April. And it's gone through the secondary process, and it also has gone through the clearing, stabilizing, and degassing stages that you've seen in other shows. So we will update that with a racking once we finish this. First thing we want to do is take the cover off the carboy. And again, the reason for the cover is to try to keep as much light out as possible. And unfortunately, while we're doing this show, there's a lot of light in here, but I'm sure it won't hurt the wine. Next thing we have to do is tip it forward like that, so that we get down and get as much wine out of the carboy as possible when we're doing the siphoning. Remove the airlock, which is not always the easiest thing to do. So if you have problems with it, you can take out the airlock first and the bung can come out next. This is the tub, by the way, that I keep using to put things in to sanitize them and clean them. It's just a simple plastic tub you can buy anywhere. And now we'll try to get the bung out. Go. Now, no chemicals go in at this point. The chemicals that we've already put in it are sufficient. We may want to put a little bit more metabisulfite just before bottling to preserve the wine longer. So we'll put the hose in, put the siphon in the top. Try to make sure that hose stays down there so it doesn't touch something else. And one push, and we get the siphoning going. And if it doesn't go to your satisfaction, which sometimes it doesn't, just give it another push. What I try to do is I try to set it down in the lowest part of the carboy. Now, if you look at this hose, you'll see that it's perfectly clear as it comes through there. Yet if you look at the bottom of the original carboy, you're going to see that white sediment down at the bottom, and that is the white sediment from the solids in the grapes. And that's what you want to leave behind. Now, these types of siphons, and there are many kinds of siphons, but this type has a little cap on the bottom of it that sits on top of that sediment. And the siphoning takes place above that cap, so that it doesn't draw in the sediment as it's going through the siphoning process. It's a very convenient instrument, obviously, in making wine. And you will see that the wine that's going into the carboy that's on the floor now is pretty clear. It won't be perfectly clear at this point. I will leave it for probably about another month just to make sure before I actually do the bottling of it. There may be a little bit of dust on the bottom of it at that point, but again, you're going to go through a similar process, which we'll show you in the next show, during the bottling stage, where you're going to siphon out of a carboy into a bottling bucket. And that should take care of the remaining solids, if there are any in there. Now, once we siphon everything out of the original carboy up here, we're going to top off. That is, we're going to add some wine so that there's only about 2 inches between the wine and the top of the carboy. And the reason for that is twofold. One is you want to always make sure that you do not have too much air in the carboy, because air causes oxidation, and it also causes causes your aging to take place quicker. And sometimes it ages too much, and you don't want that to happen. So you try to minimize the amount of air both in the carboy and in the bottling stage, when I go through that process, I'll show you also that you leave a little bit of air in the bottle. And many people wonder why, when they buy a bottle of wine, there is probably 1.5 inches or so of airspace in there, and they wonder why the manufacturer didn't fill it up all the way. They feel like they're getting cheated, but that is to help the aging process. And there's so little air in there that all it is going to do is age and not spoil the wine. The siphoning process takes a little bit of time because, after all, it is pretty slow. There's nothing pumping it out of there. It's all done by gravity. The other idea of siphoning, by the way, is to not splash the wine. You notice this tube goes all the way to the bottom of the carboy, and that is so that the wine comes down and it goes to the bottom and fills from the bottom up. And as it's filling from the bottom up, it's pushing the air out of the carboy. And that eliminates the air, obviously taking the air out of the carboy, but it also eliminates any splashing of the wine. Splashing of wine causes the wine to pick up more oxygen, and again, can contribute to being to spoilage. So you want to be careful not to splash the wine, particularly red wines. White wines are a little bit more forgiving, but the reason for the siphoning going to the bottom is to avoid that splashing. So why don't we wait for a second and let this carboy fill up, and we'll get back to you and finish it up. Okay, you can see the bubbles that are left after it gets done siphoning. It'll just stop, obviously. We'll take out the siphon at this point, shake out any of the excess. Get as much wine as we can out of it. And we'll just put this in here to be rinsed out later. Okay, now if you can see the bottom of this, there is a lot of sediment down there still. But the next time I expect there'll be very, very little sediment. And when you see the next show, it'll be on bottling, and we'll get into how much sediment is in the carboy at that point. Now I'm going to top off. This is a bottle of Sauvignon Blanc that I made in 2006. Excellent wine, and I'm going to use it. And this is perfect timing because this is my last bottle of it. So I'll be looking forward to this aging a little bit. Okay, and even though I'd like to see it filled maybe a little bit more, that's probably fine the way it is right there. I'll take the airlock, take some metabisulfite, and fill that up about 3/4 of the way. Put the cap, the inside cap on, and then the outside cap on. And insert it in the bung, and then we'll go over and push it down into the carboy. Now at this point, we're going to go back to our covering to keep the light out. And I'll put it back in its spot. Again, having cement floors, I have to be very careful of how I handle these carboys because they, hitting a cement floor would certainly break if I drop that too hard. So thanks again for watching. Come on back again next time and see us.